Hello, everybody. As usual, we are having this informal Salon Insula 42. This time we dedicate our time to a festival that I am co-producing together with the Cultural Center in ARAD and with my partners and collaborators for a long time, Mihai, Chirilov and Oana Radu. I am not in ARAD. And the artistic director of the festival, Dimitris Kerkinos, is with us, and he and Mihai will engage, I hope, in a discussion that is beyond fARAD, the festival, the international film festival, documentary film festival that we have in ARAD. And I hope that they are going to engage in an intense discussion about what do we do with festivals today, how do we make them work, because Mihai Chirilov, who is also artistic director of Transylvania International Film Festival, had this opportunity to see what happened in Transylvania International Film Festival in the pandemic year, as probably 2020 will stay in our memories. And Dimitris himself, for the Thessaloniki Film Festival, is in preparation, and he told me already that it's as if organizing two festivals, but because you have an online festival and a venue festival, but the venues are still in a situation when they are closing, and you don't really know what's going to happen. So hello, Mihai, hello, Dimitris. Hello. Very happy that you are with us. I hope that some people at 11 o'clock on a Friday morning feel as sunny and as happy as Mihai looks like, and that they are with us from time to time.
Yeah, from the balcony in the hotel in Arad. We just had
exactly
last night of the festival. It went very well, and it's still sunny. But we are glad that the screenings moved indoors, because in the evening it's pretty cold, and I don't know, this outdoor thing that worked during the summer, it's a bit tricky in the fall. Yeah.
That's true. So Mihai, precisely because you started already speaking about yesterday evening, and because this edition where Dimitris collaborates still with us, but he could not make it to Arad, and also he could not take more active part in the festival because we very late decided to do it, and also because we very late decided how to do it. And then, of course, as usual, Kiri came with this kind of creative idea and said, let's do a festival about home, because we only can stay home. I felt when he said that in our meeting that it was like a bit frustrating, but he tried to turn this frustration in an opportunity. So Dimitris, if you don't mind, I'll start with Mihai, because I want to know how did it work, this opening? We had the opening with the film ACASă by Radu Ciorniciuc and produced by Monica Lezuran-Gorgan, who was there with you and Mihai. How did it work? What were the reactions? And then Dimitris, maybe if you can tell us, how do you see this kind of film? Because we started this conversation and I'm very interested to see what's your reaction to this kind of film, the ACASă film, who was very much awarded and received very warmly in Romania and abroad. So Mihai.
So just to sum up a bit, yeah, this year's theme is home, ACASă, and it was not necessarily out of any, let's say, frustration. It had to do with a lot of objective factors. One is this not being clear what we were gonna do. I mean, this was the fate of most of cultural events here and anywhere else. I mean, everything that was supposed to happen didn't happen, or happened later, or happened outdoor, or moved online. There were many scenarios, and as many festivals, as many scenarios as possible. Of course, we came up with this idea, one, because of the budget problems, let's say. fARAD, we have to say, it's an international festival.
Mihai, hold on. This is the opportunity for me to say that I think I am thanking Grupama, the Centru Municipal Arad, and 𝐻𝐢𝐻𝐦𝐢𝐭𝐫𝐢𝐬 𝐊𝐶𝐷𝐻𝐢𝐻 for having allowed us to do the festival. It's a good moment for sponsors.
It's the sponsors moment, yeah. And but also it's not that contrived, because 2020, the pandemic year, was indeed a good year for the Romanian documentaries. I'm not gonna say that the more pandemic, the better the Romanian documentaries. It's just a coincidence, but we try to get the best out of it. And indeed, the quality and the diversity of the Romanian documentary, starting with last year's collective and with everything that happened this year, starting with Sundance selection of Radu's film 𝐴CASă, with Monica's film 𝐼𝐬 in hot dogs, wood, and with everything else that followed, that were either screened in the Thessaloniki Documentary Festival that happened online this summer, or in Sarajevo that happened also online. We don't feel that much that we were cheating, focusing on the domestic documentaries. It's a great year for the Romanian documentaries. You have to be proud about it. And indeed, that was the joke. As long as the mantra of this year was stay home, we decided to stay home. I mean, not in the proper sense, to stay home watching films made at home. But we were happy that on the last minute things kind of changed and relaxed a bit. We are not going to say why they relaxed, but suffice to say that the cinemas opened in Romania, at least. I think we were among the last European countries where the cinemas were finally allowed to open, beginning of September. And there are already many festivals that are thinking of going back home in their own venues. So we were glad that we were able to go back to Cinema Arta indoors, where the festival started 7 years ago, and where in Cinema Grădiște we have 2 locations this year, like most of the recent years, where the screenings were gonna happen inside, let's say. We had a scenario for the festival going to happen outdoor, like it was the case for many Romanian festivals, including TIFF this summer, which took place exclusively outdoor. And finally, reaching your initial question, well, how was it last night? It was just like a regular year. I mean, it was a great audience, great questions. I think the opening film was the right choice. Actually, both films, because it was sort of a double bill. We had a short film and a feature film, and there was some kind of communication and rhyming between them. Totul despre Riana, anything for Riana by Mihai Dragolea. This was the short film that opened at TIFF last month, and 𝐴CASă that also how do I put it, mirrors the theme of this year, at least in the title. Yeah. What was different? What was different indeed was the indoor view itself, because of course you have these rules established by in my opinion, a very arbitrary forum about this distancing thing. Cinema Arta, the main venue of fARAD, can host up to 200 people. We still don't know whether to feel proud about having a sold-out screening with only 60-something people. So I have to confess, indeed, and I don't think it's just me, that it's a bit, it was a bit sad to see a venue with so many empty seats. And of course, it's frustrating, to use your word, to see everybody sporting masks and having literally difficulties in hearing what people were saying. Um, but otherwise, you know, people are adapting, are good at adapting, you know. So after, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes, at least I was feeling like the cinema was full. It was a good vibration. People were raising hands, asking questions. They were interested, they were applauding. Yeah, maybe that was the way I decided to see the whole thing, like just a regular opening with full house, with a good feeling, and with great guests who are willing to share their experiences.
But very, very briefly, Mihai, did you feel that it was different the way that the Q&A happened? Do you think it was really more intense because people were taking advantage of something that is happening? Or do you think that really it was the normal...
No, I think it was the normal thing. It's just like a regular Q&A. You know, people at first are a bit reluctant in starting to ask questions, but once things get heated, they start to engage more and more and more. I think we had 2 Q&As lasting more than 40 minutes, something like that, which is quite remarkable.
Yeah, it is remarkable indeed. So thank you, Dimitris. Now we are just going to immediately go to also, because Mihai did this long introduction about fARAD, and because we all remember how interesting it was, this edition that we did in fARAD about the city. Now this kind of edition in a way was in a way premonitory, like we did something about the city, and then all of a sudden we found ourselves inside the homes, a little bit like in some of the movies and the films that we saw, the documentaries that we saw last year. I would like first to ask you also a little bit about the situation of your festival, and then tell us how you saw the film ACASă, this opening film, because we had a conversation about it, and I would like you to share it with us.
Yes, hello from Greece, from Athens. We, 4 days before we launched, the documentary festival, we had to cancel it. So we started working on an online version of the festival, and basically we organized it from the beginning, trying to get, clean versions of the films so that we can screen them online, and the people could have the choice of Greek or English, in the subtitles. And now we are preparing the fiction festival for November, and are working on now 2 scenarios. Before we were working on 3 scenarios. So the scenarios is like basically, the prevalent scenario is like a hybrid one, to have some physical screenings and some online screenings. We don't know how things are going to be like in a month or so. So we are preparing both, and we're afraid that we might be obliged to just do it online only. While Mihai organized a festival, a physical festival in summer, he had some experience. We don't have any experience with a physical festival during the pandemic. It feels sad, to be used, to organize a festival, to have it full of people and full of venues and everything, and all of a sudden, to have like a half-empty theater and not to have the vibes, of the event. So I don't know. I'm really looking forward for November. I don't know how it's going to be. Even if the capacity is limited, I prefer that version than an online version, to tell you the truth. Because as I was talking with Mihai about it, a festival needs people, a festival needs parties, a festival needs a festive atmosphere, and that's how, have learned to function within, the festival. Not only us that organize the festival, but also the people as well. An online version, I don't know, it's not my cup of tea, to tell you the truth. It's just like watching, Netflix or watching, a selection of films. It's better than nothing, of course. We have to do it because we have to survive, but, it's not a real thing. So, well, as I said, we're working, on these two scenarios. It's very complicated. The negotiations, the companies. There are a lot of companies who don't want to screen new films, online.
Yeah.
It's more expensive because you need two different formats, and it's more complicated with the tributes, that you, with older films that you cannot have like, you cannot screen films online because they don't give you permission or because they don't have the material, whatever. And of course, all this uncertainty, it's very frustrating because you work both scenarios, but you don't know what's gonna happen, like
but
nothing.
Dimitris, just to sorry, I just interrupt to ask you, for example, in Greece, did the government take any measures in favor of this new situation? Did they come up with a plan about festivals having to move online, festivals in order to survive needing support? Did this happen?
Well, not really. I mean, they support us, I mean, with the laws we have, the financial laws we have, but not that they took like measurements about the festivals. Basically, all the artistic community is suffering from the pandemic because, we need the audience, and the audience is restricted. And the way that the government is moving is, they improvise in a lot of ways. So
yeah.
I cannot say that we have like a concrete scheme of how to face the situation. We were in touch with the Ministry of Culture. They help us, financially, but not that organized or they took any measurements, especially for festivals. The theaters are closed now in Athens. They're going to open again 4th of October. Only the open air theaters, function, and just for a few more days because when the weather changes, usually, the end of September, they close as well. So that's the situation, and I hope it's going to get better, although I doubt it because the cases are more and more every day, and we really don't know how things are going to be like next month. That's the situation, and
no. So I'm coming back to my question regarding ACASA, and
yes.
The fact that Mihai was saying that this year was a very good year for Romanian documentary, which is true, and also to ask you about how did you look at this film? It was a very much awarded film, this opening film ACASA by Radu Georgiu. What's your take on the film?
Yes, we had the chance to watch the film at an early stage. I don't know if it was before Sundance or right after Sundance announced the program. And we included the film in the competition and was awarded in Thessaloniki as well. It got the special mention. I think it's a very nice film. It's the type of documentaries that I really like because starting from a local problem or a local theme, it manages to address a much wider audience and to touch upon universal themes. I mean, the way I saw this film was like a film that focused on the conflict between civilization and nature, all the new world. I mean, we have this minority, the Roma people, who are surviving in harmony with nature, and all of a sudden they have to be displaced and they have to change a lifestyle and go and live in the city. and the treatment of the society, to me, it's very similar to the treatment that a lot of Aboriginal people or indigenous people had in different times when they were considered that they were not cultural, they were not civilized, and they had to be taught how to work, you know, or to function in a different environment without taking into consideration their values or their lifestyle or appreciating that.
Yeah.
Just, you know, we negate this kind of lifestyle and the way that they work, they live in harmony. Or maybe, you know, like their house, as they say later on in the film, it's dirty or this or that. You know, the point is that they, you know, they brought up their kids with love, which is the most important thing, you know. I mean, they criticize them about how they don't take care of their children and everything, but they never, you know, think about, you know, the most important ingredient, you know, of bringing up kids, you know, which is love. So this one way of seeing things, you know, it's something very universal. It's something that affects very much minorities nowadays, but also in the past. So starting from like a local theme, this film manages, to my opinion, you know, to address wider themes and to be of universal value. And I think that's a great thing for documentaries, and it's the key to success, you know, for documentaries. Um, so, you know, I was very, very positive about this documentary. I'm very glad that we had it in our festival and that it was also awarded.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to open doors for other documentarians as well. I mean, we had a case of in Greece 20 years ago of a documentary. I mean, documentaries is arm that it's in the margins. So when you have a breakthrough with a documentary, that changes, you know, the balance, you know, in the production. I mean, producers are interested in doing
that. Yeah.
Documentaries, but also audience, you know, wants to see documentaries and realize that it's a creative, you know, like a genre as well, and it's not only educative, but it can give you pleasure and it can make you think, and you know, it just it just changes the whole picture that people have about documentary, you know. And I think these documentaries are very important, you know, to manage to make this breakthrough in the industry, but also in society.
Right. So, Mihai, from your point of view, because you were saying that this year for Romanian documentary, it was a very good year. I would like to see, you know, 𝐃𝐢𝐦𝐢𝐭𝐫𝐢𝐬, for example, he doesn't have any film studies. And do you think that, I mean, how do you see this evolution inside the system, the Romanian filmmaking system, in terms of, do you see an evolution in the way that people do documentaries today? Why is it that they turn to documentary more than they used to? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I wanted to add on what Dimitris said about ACASA, because I think it's also important a domestic feedback on this film, because let's say we are the ones not necessarily accused that things don't go well in the film, in the documentary for the said family. But for me, it was the documentary was interesting also because it's put in this context of the pandemic year, because I mean it's another nice mirroring thing, because it's about people who had to adapt. The way the pandemic forced us to adapt to a new style of living and the challenges of it, and people who do adapt easily to wearing masks, working from home, doing festivals online, and seeing this as the good new normal. And on the other side, people who don't think that masks are really necessary, who don't see festivals as proper festivals because of the lack of people, and like Dimitris said. And I actually, when I've seen the film last night again, I was looking at it from this perspective. You know, the way we were forced to change and adapt mirrors the way the family in the film was forced to change and adapt. I think it's a film about change. I mean, we are constantly subject to change in this life. The world is changing, and most of the times we have to change. We have to adapt to a new type of phone, to a new type of communication, to a new type of everything. And this was the challenging. And what is universal, indeed, like Dimitris said, is that sometimes people do adapt easily, and other people don't. And I think that's the nice contrast in the film. From the other angle, what I also find interesting in this film is that it works both ways. And that will partially answer your questions about who's making documentaries today and why. Because maybe it's not necessarily or no longer needed to be a professional filmmaker. I mean, suffice to be a journalist like Radu is, and being passionate about the subject and following the subject like a journalist, and adding a camera on this story, incidentally, with a great DOP, with a great camera person who was eventually awarded for the photography. Yeah, so the film ended up. The film feels like an investigation, like a journalist approach, yeah, and interest, but it ends up feeling like a film, and it ends up feeling like a fiction film more than a documentary.
Sure.
That's the paradox. But what I find it interesting is that the film works both ways. It works as a political documentary, but also works as a humanistic documentary. If I have to choose, I'm on the side of the humanistic documentaries, but this has to do with the involvement of each one of us. If we feel like films should engage in political topics or social topics, that's one thing, and you have festivals for that. And the film works from this point of view as well. Being in a way easier to be judged, positive or negative, because if you look at films from this perspective, you have to deal with people who have different social points of view or political points of view. We already talk about divided words. If you want to touch people on the humanistic level, I think the rate of success is higher. And I think, although the films, in my opinion, insists a bit too much on the political angle, on the activist thing, for me, it doesn't matter whether this is a Roma family or not. Of course, there are specificities, but what I like about the film is the humanistic story. It's the human touch of it, and the way it touches you, this universal story of growing up. It's a film about growing up. It's a film about being in a family. It's a film about family and love. And at the end of the day, like in all great films, it's a film about the loss of innocence. I think that's the best part of ACASA, and this is why this is how it works for me. Last night when I was talking to Monica about the film, I was daring to compare it with Linklater's film Boyhood, which also, it was a fiction film that felt like a documentary because it followed like this growing up of a kid up to the point he is reaching the adulthood, like the 18 years old, which is exactly the case of ACASA, where the main character, the heart of the story is the Vali, the teenager who's slowly reaching 18 years old, and who's like the drive and the person who keeps the family somehow together, and who's eventually the one who breaks up from the family. Just like in Boyhood, there comes a time when you have to change, when you have to flee the family, when you have to be there for the family, but you have to start your new life. You have to engage in new responsibilities. And from this point of view, it works greatly, the film. And now going back to your questions, yeah, I think that, and if you look at the documentaries this year, and most documentaries around, I think there's this new flourishing of the investigative documentaries that in many cases are not necessarily being made by people who are trained as filmmakers. I mean, once you spot a good topic, documentaries don't require this like extreme aesthetic
design, extreme aesthetic content. Yeah.
If you have a great story, and we were going at Dimitris festival, and this is in the documentary one in March, and this is where we've seen a lot of documentaries confronted, and they have like this great design of the festival structuring, you know, landscapes, topics, conflicts, portraits, you know, so you get to choose in which type of documentaries you want to engage as a viewer. And we realize that the aesthetics are not necessary, are not compulsory. If you have a great story, it doesn't matter how you filmed it. And I think we reached a point where people understood that you don't need to have a diploma in filmmaking to spot a good subject and following it, you know, wherever it goes, because this was the case with ACASA, and which is again another great thing about documentaries, when you find a good story and you go with the flow without knowing where the story will end, which will be the narrative arc, and how everything is gonna fulfill. Yeah, Radu is an example, but this comes somehow in tune, at least in Romania, with this propension for the investigation. And
yeah.
Of course, Alexander Nanau, he's a proper filmmaker, but he made an investigative documentary that feels like a thriller, you know, which is not necessarily a great-looking documentary like Alexander's previous films, Toto and The World According to 𝐼𝐬, which were emphasizing also the look of the film, because in Collective, the look, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's just the story that drives the tension that drives the story and the intensity of the topic. The same in Monica's film, who's also a proper trained filmmaker with a heavy interest in documentary. But again, she made probably her first investigative documentary that feels like a thriller, this Wood, you know. So you spot a topic that makes headlines in the news. It's a news story, you know. You see it in the news, and then you decide to make a film, partly reportage, so partly proper cinema, without, I repeat, being necessarily glamorously looking.
Yeah. So thank you, Mihai. Before asking Dimitris to comment upon his own view about the way that documentaries and documentary filmmakers have evolved recently, I would like just to add to what you're saying. It's interesting that what you're saying, Mihai, reminds me of the fact that we did want initially to do this edition on investigative documentary. I mean, that was one idea that we had. I also would like to add that both Radu Ciorniciuc and Mircea Topolan, who created, who are the ones who did, I mean, who are the authors, in fact, of ACASA, are both journalists, and both have, however, a very strong recognition in terms of image, let's say, image mastering. They are both image people, and this can be seen in the film. This is important in the film. And third, I think that indeed what is interesting is to see that you have an author like Radu Ciorniciuc going from a investigative journalist towards telling a story in a documentary, and then you have an author like Nanau going from telling stories to becoming more investigative. It's interesting how these things are balancing in what the films that are realized, the documentaries that are realized today in Romania. So Dimitris, what is your take on what Mihai was saying, not especially about ACASă, but how do you see the evolution of the documentary recently?
Well, we have a so-called creative documentary for the last few years, where the barriers between fiction and documentary are not clear. And I think that's a great advantage, you know, and very, very creative, you know, to put a narration into documentary and break from the old school documentaries, you know, with the talking heads or with, you know, the standard way of making documentaries for television. So we have documentaries that feel like fiction and fiction that feels like documentary. So, and at the end of the day, you know, it's a good film, no matter if it's a documentary or a fiction. So I think documentary has come closer to fiction through the narrations, through the ways that documentaries are narrating their story. Of course, you know, the good subject, the important subject is a key, you know, for a good documentary. But I do think that you need a point of view. I mean, a lot of documentaries have a strong theme, but they lack a point of view, or they lack an approach, you know, an originality in the approach. In Greece, at least, this is the case. A lot of documentaries have a good theme, but they don't have like a creative approach. They don't have a point of view. They just stick to old-fashioned ways of making documentaries, and so they, you know, they cannot go ahead. It's also festivals, you know, have included documentaries in a lineup that previously would only include fiction films. So I think this has helped a lot as well, you know, not to pay attention to the genre, not to be prejudiced, you know, whether it's a fiction or a genre. You just go to see a film, you know. And I think that helps in the evolution. It just gives more liberty, you know, to directors, you know, to find ways, creative ways, you know, to handle, you know, their themes. So I think this is one thing that has pushed documentary forward, you know, the breaking with old school documentary and the introduction of imaginable narrative ways, you know, to tell the stories. And I think, yes, that's the most important thing that has happened to documentary, you know, the last few years.
And apart from this fact that in Romania you have now this kind of revival and very strong push to the documentary, what other countries, Dimitris, do you think, I mean, do you feel that are there clusters of documentaries that appeared in other countries that are strong, just like a group of documentary filmmakers in other countries that just popped up in the recent years?
Yeah, well, you know, there are national cinemas that they have a tradition, you know, in making good documentaries. I mean, English are very good in making documentaries, or the Scandinavians, but a lot of times it's a matter of a personal case, you know. I mean, you have a lot, I mean, in Greece as well, you know, the production is great. It's like we have like more than 100 documentaries a year, but only a few of them stick out, you know. And that's because, you know, these few directors, you know, they break the rules, you know, they experiment, they try to find ways to narrate their stories, you know, and they don't stick, you know, to old fashions. So And that's the case with a lot of cinemas. You know, I mean, we get to watch a lot of films, documentaries from Iran or from Turkey or from, I don't know, a lot of countries. And you see that a lot of them, although they have strong themes, they don't have, you know, the capability of making this strong theme, you know, appeal to a wider audience. And a lot of times they are reduced to local interest, you know, because of the way they handle the stories.
Mhm.
So I think it's a matter of the person who makes the documentary, you know, and it's very important, you know, if you have this liberated view about cinema and documentary, you know, it helps you do good documentaries, no matter what, you know, the production in your country, what they do. Of course, if you have like a background like the English have, you know, of course you're gonna have a high production value and you're gonna follow the rules, you know, that you have been taught, you know. So
I see. Okay, now I'm going to come back to another question that I'm going to address both of you. And of course, Mihai, you can also react to what Dimitris said just now regarding the groups of creative documentarists appearing in other countries. But I'm going to get back to this idea of festivals going online. And I want to ask both of you, don't you think that there is any positive things to this going online of some festivals? Is there any positive thing to this? Mihai?
Well, in my opinion, not much. I mean, in my opinion, a festival happening online is not a festival. I think it should be invented another term for this, or maybe, I don't know. This is the paradigm that we have to accept. But being forced to move online with an event that implies a congregation, a physical congregation, people, a palpable vibration. These things don't translate well in online. The advantage, okay, that might be the let's say the resources. If you don't have enough resources, or if you don't have enough managing skills, it's easier to do it online. But then again, you hit another wall, because like Dimitris said, and we are confronted with this at TIFF, but not with the festival itself, but with the streaming platform, because we realize that if you want to do things online, the costs are in a way lower, but on the other hand, you have to pay the fees for the film much higher, because normally you can reach a higher audience. I mean, online, that's infinity. You can have millions of people. Physically, you can have only the capacity of a venue. And according to this, you can negotiate the screening fee, the reach of the film, and everything. Online, you can go on and on. You can have more people watching a film, so the reach can be bigger, but the feeling for me as a festival organizer, for us, is non-existent. I mean, I cannot get excited by the look of a person in the darkness of a cinema watching a movie. And this is a view that it's very satisfactory to me. I don't get to meet those people going out from a film, stopping 10 meters away from the cinema in the middle of the street and debating about a film, and I want to be part of it. I cannot be part of it. Arguing on online messages is a different kind of communication.
Yeah.
Just like in life, there's one, you talk with people in one way when you send a WhatsApp or a message or on Facebook, and you talk completely differently when you meet that person online. It's a different type of
contact, of connection, of interaction,
and approach. But again, I think if that's the new paradigm, probably we have to adapt to it, which I hope it's not gonna be the case. But otherwise, I think online could be good for not for film screenings, because that's Netflix, that's every online platform to watch films, you name it. It could be good for organizing, let's say, industry events, like we're gonna do now the lab at fARAD. I'm very curious how
this will work. I'll ask a question about it. Yeah,
and I think it's gonna work.
Yeah,
Differently than the physical, but I think there's a good chance for things to work. Maybe things will be more focused. I think this will be the game. But to experience an artistic act online, you cannot compare it with the experience,
with a live experience
in a festival. That's my point. And if you want like a very let's say vulgar comparison, it's like watching a concert on a DVD and being there. You know, you can't compare. You just cannot compare.
Right, Dimitris.
Well, I totally agree with Mihai. The only positive thing that I can see in this situation is that it helps us survive. You know, we keep organizing a festival and we're waiting for the time to get back, you know, to normality. I really don't like it at all. It's something very cold. It's not a festival, you know. I mean, I'm so depressed. I have films in the Balkan survey this year with great directors, and the great directors cannot come. You know, you cannot talk with them. People cannot discuss with them. Okay, maybe they send a message, but they won't have, you know, this opportunity, you know, to see them, to ask them, to congratulate them, or to argue with them, or whatever. And that's all this dynamism, you know, it just it goes wasted. And it's a pity for the creators, for the organizers, for the audience. I really hope that we get back to normality soon. And till then, you know, okay, we'll adapt, we'll do our best, but it's not what I like, you know. And I remember in previous year, you know, making fun of people who were proposing online festivals. We were arguing, you know, what is this online festival? You know, I mean, cinema is to go to the theater, you know, to be with other people, to go out and discuss with them and go for a drink and talk to the film. You know, otherwise you watch the film, then you start watching another one. You know, you forget the first. You know, you don't have the time, you know, to digest, you know, the films. You know, it's completely different experience, you know.
And do you think that we will adapt? Do you think, like Kiri, that we will have to adapt? One will have to adapt. How do you think? Is it better to adapt? Is it better to resist? How do you see this, Dimitris?
Well, for the time being, we have to adapt, and if it, I don't know, and then later on probably resist. So I don't know how it will turn out, you know, but.
Right. Okay. Now we have time for a last question, and my question is going to be regarding the lab, the fARAD lab. Dimitris, you didn't have the time to participate, let's say for many years because you just joined us very recently in fARAD. But I would like to start with you and then ask Mihai about it. We are organizing this lab for young and emerging documentaries, and anyway for any project that wants to apply and get feedback from professionals and develop the project further. What we are very happy about is that many of the people who came to the lab finally did their films, and the films were very successful. And for us, it's not that the lab produced this success in any way, but it confirms to us that it was a good choice. We made a good choice. And second, that finally we hope that the director really used what they got, the feedback they got during the lab. And this lab has two parts, and one of them is also run by Dana Bunescu. for whom we're very grateful to be part of the fARAD team. And I would like to ask you the following. This kind of lab is very, very rarely organized because people are together. This year we are going to do it online indeed, but part of the good thing was that the directors were together and that they could spend a couple of days together discussing about film, about documentary, about their films, etc., formally and informally. And I would like to ask you, do you think that it's more important to have this kind of lab for documentaries or for fiction films, or is it more important for a documentary to have this kind of feedback in the process? What do you think?
Well, I think it's useful for both genres. I mean, feedback is very important. Being with your colleagues, professionals, directors, whatever, you know, it's very, very useful. You know, all this exchange of ideas and all this criticism, you know, that someone is going to receive, I think it can only work for the better. And also the human contact is very important. It's a different thing to talk to someone on the phone and a different thing to be with him in a lab and then go for a beer and keep discussing. Or so it's a different thing, and I think it's very, very useful and very important. And I don't know if it works better for fiction or for documentary, but I think, you know, it works for both of them. I mean,
but a lot of the people who participated in the lab, some of them are students in the art faculty in the cinema school, and they say that it's for them it's very useful because the school doesn't give them this kind of feedback. It's much more judgmental.
yes,
And
yes.
yeah, so how would you comment on that?
You know, I agree. First of all, you know, my experience last year with fARAD lab was that you have opinions from different professionals. You know, they watch your film, someone who is organizing a festival or selects films, someone who is a producer, someone who is a director, someone who does the editing. So you get to hear all these different perspectives, which are very useful and important, you know, because you need to think about all of them.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know.
Yeah, that's so there's a difference in terms of how a school approaches this kind of feedback and the way in which this lab allows to a more direct and more useful in a way of approaching, because it's both more tender, but in the same time more direct, and can be more critically positive for the way that a film is developing. Mihai.
You have all this experience from these professionals, you know, that they can give you part of their experience, which
very specific. Yeah,
you don't get it at school. At school, you learn the rules, you know, but
right, Mihai.
I think first of all, the documentary, a person who's making a documentary is more free than someone who's doing a fiction film, and I think that's why more and more people also feel at ease with choosing this documentary path. On the other hand, it's easier to make documentaries if we have to choose, because with a fiction film, there's a whole army of people that you need to dispatch on the field. For a documentarist, if you have a good idea, a decent camera, you can go by yourself at work, and you feel more free to engage in your own enterprise. And that's why I also think that you don't have to be like a filmmaker and like a proper trained filmmaker to know how to deal with people that are trained film professionals on set and everything. This is the example of Mihai Dragola, who's also one of our guest this year, who had a short film and who's approaching documentaries differently than other colleagues or other documentarists who are, let's say, maybe they have great stories, but they are a bit lazy. They want at first a good budget and then they start their own adventure. They want to have the comfort of a fiction filmmaker before engaging in this experience. Mihai, and there are many other people, you know, who make films guerrilla style with their own money, driven 100% by their own story, you know, and in the process feeling more free. Giving feedback in a lab also allows people to keep that freedom, I think. For a filmmaker who's making fiction film, once he gets into a lab, there are so many people and experts who try to put their film in a box, precisely because the film exists in a nutshell, because the script is already there. It's in the filmmaker's mind and it's put on paper, the story is there. There is not much to change. Once you have an expert analyzing, he is gonna apply his own way of seeing things, and he might change the film, giving the impression that this is the right way to do it, and in the process altering the freedom of the filmmaker, the freedom of the story, offering or promising instead a better outcome, which you never know it's going to be the case. From my experience in the fARAD lab, and this is also because the lab is very lax, and I don't know what's the word, it's very flexible, because we allow
informal. It's very informal. Yeah.
And also it's not that strict, because we allow projects in various forms of formats. I mean, films that are really at the starting point, they only have sketched, they have an idea, they did some essays, some sketches, they know what they want to do, but they still don't know how to put everything in order to make things work as a whole. Then you have people who filmed a lot, sensing that they have a great story, but they don't know how to put everything together to have the best narrative arc and to extract the essence of the story. And this is understandable. Once you get sucked into a story and you film hours and hours and hundreds of hours of material, it's easier to get lost in your proper story. Whereas for someone who's watching this from the outside, maybe not maybe, for sure, it's easier to spot the drama or the heavy point and guide the filmmaker in his own labyrinth of footage. Then you have people who are, and there's a good example because we have this year a project in the lab like we had in the past as well, people who are engaging in this footage, archive footage thing. They want to tell a story through existing archive footage, and what's the best way to use the archive footage, which is at the end of the day a editing thing. I mean, you really have to master the editing, how to put that material together again to work as a whole. But again, going back to what I said at the beginning, it's for someone who's making documentaries, freedom is still there. I think a documentary person feels more free, also because, and I think there are a lot of documentaries and documentary people who don't know where the story will lead them. And that was the case with ACASÄ as well, because you didn't know, in a way, the outcome, what's gonna happen, you know, and you need a closure for this kind of story. And the films, they, in the process, and there were many years of following that family, they found like the best closure for the film, or the film can lead you to an unexpected ending, and which also gives, you know, this feeling of being free with your own material, being free to improvise, being free to experiment, being free to follow, as long as you have the drive to do it. And I think in order to be like a good documentary, like I said, to preserve your freedom, you don't need a lot of money, you just need a lot of patience.
That's true.
That's true. So Dimitris, a last comment, reacting maybe to what Mihai is saying, and then I will ask Mihai to end the conversation by telling us about the film that fARAD is going to present this evening.
Yeah. Well, I agree with Mihai. Like making a fiction film, you're really enslaved, by the people that give you money. They really influence a lot the script and the things you're gonna do. While this is not the case in the documentary, of course there are documentary directors who, don't want to experiment. They just want to make a film that is gonna be sold on TV, and then they comply, with the rules, the TV rules. But well, this is another case, but still it's very evident, at least here in Greece. A lot of them, they make documentaries, because they want to survive as documentaries, So they make films that they know they're going to go on TV, and they comply to the rules of TV, But it's true that when you make a documentary, you have more freedom. And financially you are more independent, and that's why it's more creative, and that's why it's such a hot genre, and it evolves so dynamically, and you get to see things that you don't expect. So yeah.
So that's, however, an important sensitive difference between the way in which you create when you are a documentary filmmaker and when you are a fiction director. Mihai, what's the film this evening, and what would you comment upon it? You did say a few words already, but just to have for those who look and are in Arad and want to come.
Well, there are several options. We have 4 films screening tonight, and in a way, it gives like several angles. I mean, it serves as a proof to what we were saying. You can make various types of documentaries. We have, of course, a repeat of ACASÂ, because it was a sold-out performance last night, like it was expected. So we have a repeat tonight. And we have a film called Wood by Monica Lăzurean-Gordan, who's also following this thread of investigative documentaries. We have a screening that was developed previously in the fARAD lab called Super Ombre, which is a completely different type of documentary. It's the portrait documentary. You find like a great character that you want to follow, and you find like a complex story, a bigger than life person, like it's the case of 𝐃𝐢𝐦𝐢𝐭𝐫𝐢𝐬 who's a mountain climber, who's a medic, and a father, who has to deal with all these 3 ambitions, of being a great doctor, a performant mountain climber who wants to go higher and higher and higher, and this maybe mundane job of being a good father, which proves in the process the most difficult of them all. So that's like the angle in this story. And on the other hand, we have tonight again a different type of documentary. The documentary told from the first person, so to say, like the diary type, well, the wicked people will call them the navel gazing documentaries, the people who are making films about themselves, which is okay if you have a great story, you know, to tell about yourself, and which again, when it's palpable, why you do it, and that works for Totul nu va fi bine, everything will not be fine, by Adrian Pârgu, who made, who's let's say a victim of a Chernobyl disaster. You know, he was born with several malformation, precisely with handicapped eyesight, and who makes a film about healing himself and trying to exorcise this trauma of the past and start functioning as a human being, you know, like, let's say, like a normal, I know it's not the right word, but you know, it's that kind of documentary that exposes yourself, deals with this emotional nudity, and you need a lot of courage to tell a story when you come from this far with such a heavy trauma. This is another angle, you know, which I tend to favor because, and maybe this is the moment in a way to draw the line and put also the nowadays context, you know, perspectives in context. We live in a more and more political world, and where everything, including art, is judged from a political point of view, and this also starts to be seen in a local documentaries, you know, who may be feeling that adopting a certain or maybe validated political point will bring them points, you know, and will make their film better just because it's on the right side of the politics, which is something I don't tend to agree. There are festivals, of course, about human rights, about social topics, which every idea about the film festival and theme is welcome. But if we talk about film and documentaries as art, I think we have to see beyond this, and that's why, going back to the start, you know, talking about ACASă, it is a political film, but its greatest qualities are that it's a great story. It's a great film, you know, that works not only from a political level. And yeah, I want to in a way to give like not a warning, but I am a bit anxious about this direction that I feel in nowadays documentaries, you know, exploring world and stories from a political side and being just this.
Yeah, and considering that this is the...
This is enough. This is the most important thing, and this is enough. To me, this is not enough, because everything that works on an obvious level should be about something that's not that obvious, but works at a more profound level.
Thank you, Mihai. Dimitris, do you want to say a last word, something that you didn't say and I didn't ask about?
Well, you know, all I want to say is that I really miss ARAD, that, you know, I wish I were there, and, you know, it feels you are lacking something, you know, when you're not doing the things the way, according to me, you know, we should do. So let's hope that next year things will be...
We will be together, yes.
Normalized and be together again, and have the chance to talk about all these things, you know, with an audience, and having a beer, and
great.
Have a real festival.
Thank you so much, Dimitris.
Thank you.
Kiri, it's sunny in Arad, it's sunny in Cluj, and I suppose it's sunny in Athens.
Yes,
so at least we still have the sun. Bye, and thank you.
So close to the sun, yeah.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Thank you.